Those pictures that are coming in and that image that you see is the rocket, because the separation just taking place in the last 30 seconds at the Unity rocket ship separating from Eve the carrier plane, and this the picture inside, and those G-forces that our guest was describing a little earlier really kicking, and you can see the rocket boosters, and this is about 90 seconds this climb, and they're going close until to 4,000 kilometers an hour, and they VE separated from Eve, that carrier plane that had taken them over thumbs up there from some of those on board, but it had taken them up to what, about 15-16 kilometers above the Earth, and then they climb at such a rapid amount, and there you see as they release themselves from their seats the moments of weightlessness there in that Unity rocket ship, and they would have had lots of training and lots of anticipation and build up, but this one of the absolutely crucial moments for them, as they have just a few minutes of weightlessness at around 85 kilometers above the Earth's zero gravity, and these three, and their look at that picture, because that too is what they are up there to see, the curvature of the Earth as they look back from 85 kilometers up, and all of them look at them glued to the window looking back down at Earth as this space tourism flight takes place. And I was telling you a little earlier some wonderful stories of those three people on board John Goodwin, and he is 80. He bought his tickets many years ago, around $250,000 he paid back in 2005, and we know he is Parkinson's. He is the second person with Parkinson's to go to the edge of space, and had feared his diagnosis would mean he could not take part, but he really keen to underline that his condition doesn't define him, and that's why he was so determined to actually go ahead with this. And you can also see the hair of Anastasia Myers and Keisha Schaff, mother and daughter, that too an absolutely wonderful story, because the mother was describing to media how she was heading back to the UK, was just sorting out her daughter's visa when she entered a competition to join the spaceflight, and much later she heard that she had won together with her daughter. Look at those pictures, and of course a lot of questions about space tourism, the value, the cost, the environmental damage, but that is what they are paying to actually see as it arcs round. Absolutely glorious pictures there of the Earth that they look back to, and Susie Imber, who was with me a short while ago, is back. And Susie, I don't know if you're seeing these pictures as well, but it is absolutely magnificent as they look out of that rocket ship back towards Earth and see the curvature, the blue, and whenever you listen to astronauts their description of that actual sight, it is always incredibly moving for them. Yeah, they call this the overview effect, which is the idea that when you're up at significant altitude and you look back at the Earth, there are no boundaries, there are no countries, and you also begin to see really the fragility of the planet underneath you, because the atmosphere is so thin, just this thin layer, especially in the International Space Station. You look back and you realize really how fragile the Earth is, and then you look the other way. So many of them will be looking down at the Earth, but some will also perhaps have a glance in the other direction and see the vast blackness of space above them as well, again just reminding us about how important our fragile planet is, and really how unique. And we were seeing the pictures only a few seconds ago of the weightlessness. They don't get that for long, but you could see them, all of them on board, really enjoying that experience. I suppose in the training they have had it simulated, but this the real thing for them to actually experience. Been on these parabolic flights where you get about 30 seconds of feeling weightless before the plane has to pull up, because the plane is falling towards the ground, and you get a sequence of these, a series of these, also called the vomit comics, by the way, because the journey is quite tough, so they may have done this and had this experience, but they did not have the view that they have right now. And I think a lot of us are very used to seeing pictures and images of the Earth from space, but I think really being there and being able to take that in, as well as throwing the microgravity, is really a quite a special thing. What do you think? Though is the real value of this, I can see the value for those individuals on board. They paid huge amounts of money to actually be on board, but in terms of scientific value, there are scientific experiments. I think there are some payloads actually on this flight, the last flight that they did had members of the Italian Air Force on board, and they ran a series of, I think, 19 experiments during the period of microgravity. They did not get to have as much fun because they were doing experimentation as they were in this period of microgravity, and so there, as I mentioned earlier, there definitely are experiments that will really benefit from having these few minutes of this microgravity experience. Rather than a few seconds on a parabolic flights, it's much cheaper than sending something up on the International Space Station to orbit the Earth to do these experiments. So there are two sides to this coin. Of course, there are the people who get to have this experience and hopefully make a difference and come back to the Earth and really sort of campaign for protection of the environment and so on, but there is also a scientific side to this as well, and hopefully that SY will be more explored as these flights continue. You talk about hoping that they will get involved in environmental work, and yet there is a balance here isn't there, because there must be significant environmental damage in terms of what it actually takes to get a rocket like this up to the edge of space. Yeah, for sure. So this isn't without emissions in its own right. You're absolutely correct. I don't think the emissions are as high as you might imagine, but perhaps Virgin Galactic might be able to give us some figures. But yeah, you're right, there is a balance, as there are in many things, when we get on a plane to go from the UK to the US, we're causing emissions, and we need to think about the balance between the value of our trip and the amount of emissions that we're a part of. And so I think there is no exception to this, and in a way that's why the scientific experiments are important, because we don't have alternatives for this kind of scientific experimentation. There is no other option that is carbon neutral, and so at some point, we have to accept that maybe in order to do the experiments we are going to have to leave a carbon footprint behind, and ultimately say 2 years, 3 years. On how often do you think we might see flights like this? The first flight was last month, the second flight is now. I expect we'll be seeing the frequency dramatically increasing. Virgin Galactic building more of the spaceships that will then enable them to have flights more frequently, so I expect that we'll go first to maybe one a week, and maybe even higher than that as we go forward. They have got 800 tickets that they have sold, and some of those ticket holders, as we mentioned, have held those tickets for a really long time, so they're quite keen, of course, to give people that opportunity to fly. Susie, I've got to cut across you, but we will leave it there with these fabulous pictures.